Hi, I'm Dr. Thomas Armstrong. Welcome to Multiple Intelligences and Neurodiversity, how Howard Gardner's savant criterion in MI theory anticipated the emerging neurodiversity movement. The most important chapter in Howard Gardner's groundbreaking book, Frames of Mind, is only 14 pages long, but in my estimation, it is the centerpiece of MI theory. Titled, What is an Intelligence? This chapter describes 8 criteria that need to be met before a competency can qualify as a full-fledged intelligence and take its place among the other multiple intelligences. In this presentation, I'd like to focus on criterion number 2, the existence of savants, prodigies, and other exceptional individuals. With this criterion, Gardner suggested that one important source of evidence in support of the validity of his 8 intelligences is the fact that there are individuals who display extraordinary capabilities in one or more of the intelligences, despite possessing severe deficits in other intelligences. In other words, in these individuals, one can see the isolation of one or more intelligences, standing like a mountain towering over the other intelligences that represent valleys of deficiency. In these savants, high ability in math, language, drama, art, or navigating the natural world seems to coexist with marked difficulties in social interaction, logical problem solving, emotional self-regulation, and other capacities that make up age-appropriate behavior. In Frames of Mind, Gardner provides examples of 6 of the 8 intelligences. In this presentation, I'm not going to use the examples in Frames of Mind, but rather illustrate how there appear to be savant abilities in each of the 8 intelligences, and I'll illustrate this by focusing on savants whose gifts have been widely publicized. The first example is Kim Peek, perhaps during his lifetime the most famous savant in the world. He was one of the inspirations for the movie Rain Man. He is believed to have had FG syndrome, a form of intellectual disability. His particular savant gift was in linguistic intelligence. He could accurately recall the contents of at least 12,000 books. Peek read books, memorized them, and then placed them upside down on the shelf to show that he had finished reading them, a practice he maintained all his life. For logical mathematical intelligence, there's Daniel Tammet, an individual diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder. You can see that he's a number whiz. Here he was working out the value of pi, in his head. Pi is the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, and he recited the first 22,514 digits of pi in just over 5 hours before a live audience. He also showed savant gifts in linguistic intelligence. He taught himself Icelandic in 1 week and took part in an interview on live TV in Iceland, where he spoke fluently in that language. For spatial intelligence, I'm featuring Stephen Wiltshire, an autistic savant living in the UK who has a photographic memory. After a 20-minute helicopter ride, he drew a perfect aerial layout of the city of London after seeing it only that one time. His 19-foot-long drawing of 305 square miles of New York City is also based on a 20-minute helicopter ride. He sells originals and prints of his art on his website at stephenwiltshire.co.uk. While her parents don't believe she's a true savant, Gloria Lenhoff certainly comes close. She was diagnosed as a young child with Williams syndrome, a form of intellectual disability that affects 1 in every 9,000 people. While Gloria's IQ is 55 and she gets lost if she's more than a couple of blocks from her home because of her deficiency in spatial intelligence, She can sing nearly 2,500 songs in more than 30 different languages, amazingly all with a perfect accent. She has collaborated with various world-class symphonies and other popular bands, including Aerosmith. The next example may also not represent a pure example of a savant, but Spanish actor Pablo Pineda most certainly represents an exceptional individual with an uneven cognitive profile. He has Down syndrome, which typically results in difficulties with logical, mathematical, and certain aspects of linguistic intelligence. But his true gifts reside in drama, which is a synthesis of bodily kinesthetic, linguistic, interpersonal, and intrapersonal intelligences. He received the Concha de Plata Award at the 2009 San Sebastian International Film Festival for his performance in the film Yo También. He also holds a diploma in teaching and a BA in educational psychology, and was the first student with Down syndrome in Europe to obtain a university degree. For the natural intelligence, there is Temple Grandin, probably now the most famous person in the world with autism spectrum disorder. She serves as a consultant to the livestock industry, where she offers advice on animal behavior, and is also an outspoken advocate for autism rights and neurodiversity in general. She said one needs to think like an animal to effectively manage them. She is the author of the book Animals in Translation, Using the Mysteries of Autism to Decode Animal Behavior. Howard Gardner says in Frames of Mind that he doubts whether there are true savants in the interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligences, although he does suggest that people with Down syndrome possess the ability to forge effective social relationships with others in comparison with their language and logical deficits. I'd like to suggest, however, that the shamans of indigenous cultures may represent examples of each of these two intelligences. They possess an uncanny ability to see into the psychic lives of other people, and they usually do this by diving deep into their own inner world to retrieve energies that can be curative in their effect. It's also possible that these individuals provide good examples of savants for existential intelligence, the posited ninth intelligence, which Gardner suggests may someday prove worthy of full admission to his theory. I first became aware of neurodiversity when I was cruising the internet in the early 2000s and discovered this website, neurodiversity.com. It's no longer actively functional and has changed its URL to neurodiversity.net. But I was intrigued by this site, especially the homepage and its slogan below the photos, honoring the variety of human wiring. The photos show 8 figures, some well-known, others not so much, who were differently wired. They include the artist Andy Warhol, the pianist Glenn Gould, the mathematician Alan Turing, and the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. As a writer, I had been keeping notes on eccentric and exceptional individuals for several years, thinking of possibly doing a book on how they often didn't conform to society's definition of good mental health, yet were highly influential in their fields. And when I saw this site, something just clicked. One definition for neurodiversity that I like is, quote, an idea which asserts that atypical, neurodivergent neurological development is a normal human difference that is to be recognized and respected as any other human variation, end quote. In other words, just as we value biodiversity and cultural diversity, we ought to value neurodiversity, or differences in human brains. There's no normal brain sitting in a vat in a lab somewhere that represents the typical brain. And since this is the case, we can't say for sure which brains are normal and which are abnormal. This idea is transformative in providing a different perspective on individuals who we viewed up to this time as having brains that are dysfunctional, disordered, or deficient. As I've said in one of my articles, you don't say that a calla lily has pedal deficit disorder. You appreciate its uniqueness. And we should celebrate this uniqueness in human beings as well. The word neurodiversity was first used in print in 1999, but it has really taken off over the past few years. It's being recognized, for example, in education, where institutions like Stanford University and the London School of Economics have developed their own neurodiversity centers to help individuals, students who learn differently. It's become a hot topic in the business world, where companies are seeing that people on the autism spectrum, for example, are better than neurotypicals at certain IT tasks like writing computer manuals, looking for bugs in computer code, and analyzing certain types of data. The book that I think gave neurodiversity a real boost is called Neurotribes: The Legacy of Autism and the Future of Neurodiversity by Steve Silberman, which became a New York Times bestseller and won the Samuel Johnson Prize in the UK for the best nonfiction book of the year. Howard Gardner seems to have anticipated the neurodiversity movement by about 15 years with his criterion about savants in frames of mind. While Gardner's focus was on the rare examples of the super savants, such as those individuals I discussed earlier, neurodiversity has drawn a lot of its energy from emerging research in cognitive psychology, indicating that neurodivergent individuals, not just a few, but a substantially greater number, possess a range of abilities that are related to Gardner's 8 intelligences. I'd like to link specific neurodivergent conditions to Gardner's intelligences in the rest of this presentation. For autism spectrum disorder, research suggests an ability to detect small details in larger visual patterns, which is a part of Gardner's spatial intelligence. Essentially, they're Where's Waldo experts. Can you find Waldo in this diagram or in this drawing? They see the trees for the forest, not the forest for the trees. They also have an ability to see visual patterns. Dr. Laurent Motron at Montreal University has pointed out that it makes a big difference what IQ test is used to measure the intelligence of individuals diagnosed with autism. If the Raven's progressive matrices test is used, which is based largely on abstract, logical, visual patterns of the kind that you see here, the results range from 30 to 70% higher than if a standard WISC IQ test is used. That, of course, also is an indicator of their logical mathematical intelligence in terms of their ability to understand logical patterns. Cambridge University scientist Dr. Simon Baron-Cohen suggests that people on the autism spectrum are usually systemizers as opposed to empathizers. They do well with logical systems where there are fixed inputs and fixed outputs. Examples include a complex machine, a computer program, a mathematical system, a football game, or even something as rudimentary as a young child diagnosed with ASD staring for hours at a rotary fan in the kitchen. Many dyslexics also show evidence of high spatial intelligence, but it manifests in a different way than people on the autism spectrum. They are particularly apt in visualizing in 3 dimensions. They do well, better than neurotypicals, on what's called the impossible objects task, where people are asked to tell whether a picture of an object such as displayed here, would be possible to build in 3 dimensions. This one can't be built, or if it can be built, I'd like to see it. Dyslexics are more accurate and faster at doing this kind of task than neurotypical individuals. And this is an ability that can be useful in fields like architecture and design. Dyslexics often also excel in entrepreneurship. They often are visionaries and, in a sense, represent the opposite of people on the autism spectrum. Dyslexics see the forest for the trees. They see the forest first and then the individual trees. People on the autistic spectrum, as I mentioned, see the individual's trees first and later, perhaps at all, the entire forest or the big picture. But it's the dyslexic individual who is usually the big picture thinker. There's ample evidence of individuals with dyslexia and also ADHD who have been very successful in holding a vision for a company and leading it to a capitalization of billions of dollars, including Richard Branson of the Virgin Group, which controls more than 400 companies in various fields. Now, going clockwise, the next person is Charles Schwab, founder of the well-known brokerage firm named after him. Then we have Ted Turner, who is well known as the founder of CNN. And finally, Paul Orfalea, who founded the copy center Kinko's, which was named after his kinky red hair. Looking at ADHD, we can see evidence of bodily kinesthetic intelligence. Kids diagnosed with ADHD are usually hands-on learners, physical learners who need to move to learn, who need to make things to learn, who need to feel things in their gut as they learn about something new. American radio personality Tom Hartman wrote a book called ADD, A Different Perception, several years ago, where he suggested that people with ADHD, or as it was then known, ADD, are hunters in a farmer's world. Hunters are constantly on the move in search of food, which is hyperactivity. They attend to many different stimuli at the same time. That's distractibility. And they respond quickly to input from the environment. And there you have impulsivity. Thus, the things that make for an excellent hunter turn up as the symptoms of ADHD in the classroom and the home. And I should point out that scientific studies are beginning to confirm some of the intuitions that Hartman originally proposed. ADHD also manifests in the form of a person's proclivity for novelty seeking. They don't do well with boredom. And this proclivity for novelty may show up in a visual-spatial way as a shiny new object or kinesthetically as a new environment to explore, and probably shows up in all or most of the other intelligences as well, certainly in the natural intelligence where there are so many new things to explore. Studies suggest that ADHD is associated with creative behavior. Just like with the hunter in a farmer's world metaphor, we can view the child, teen, or adult diagnosed with ADHD within 2 different frames. On the one side, we have the symptoms of ADHD, and on the other, the traits of a creative person. The interesting thing is that these lists are almost identical with each other, except that on the left side, the words are negative, and on the right side, they're positive. The hyperactive person with ADHD is the artist filled with vitality and energy. The distractible person with ADHD is the creative person with a divergent creative mind, and so forth. You can learn more about these connections in my book, The Myth of the ADHD Child, 101 Ways to Improve Your Child's Behavior and Attention Span Without Drugs, Labels, or Coercion. Now turning to intellectual disabilities, researchers and educators alike see the dramatically expressive flair of many people with Down syndrome, like Pablo Pineda that we looked at earlier. As Dr. Downs himself said in the 19th century, people with Down syndrome have a talent for being mimics, and they bring to this a lively sense of the ridiculous, and he suggested that they could use this ability in practical ways, as Pablo Pineda has done. Here, for example, is Chris Burke, who was diagnosed with Down syndrome and became a television star on the 1980s primetime series Life Goes On. He is also a musician, has written a book, and has advocated widely for people with Down syndrome. Another quality of many individuals diagnosed with intellectual disabilities relates to Gardner's personal intelligences, interpersonal and intrapersonal. This is represented by the warmth and vitality of their social interactions. This is especially true of many people diagnosed with Down syndrome, who researcher Elizabeth Dykins said has been also referred to as, quote, Prince Charming syndrome, unquote. This is very important to note because people regard this type of quality as nice, but certainly not very important in the big scheme of things. MI theory suggests that that is a mistake, that it represents strengths in at least two intelligences. I sometimes like to ask people if they were on a desert island, who would they prefer to share it with? A highly interpersonal jerk or a person with Down syndrome? I think you get my point. Finally, with intellectual disabilities, we can see in certain populations particular proclivities in musical intelligence. Here, for example, are several musicians at the Berkshire Hills Music Academy, a school in Western Massachusetts for people with developmental disabilities who have musical interests and abilities. The Academy has many students with Williams syndrome, which I talked about earlier in regard to Gloria Lenhoff. Students spend half of their time on independent living skills and the other half honing their musical intelligence. Regarding social and emotional disorders, the personal intelligences seem to be both the primary source of a person's difficulties with social and emotional disorders, but they also fuel the strengths of those individuals as well. Many people in the movie industry, actors especially, have had to deal with depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, and more, including many reports of suicides. This, for example, is 1940s actress Veronica Lake, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia as a child. But the sensitivity that made her ill was very likely the sensitivity that made her a great actress as well. I suggest that you see her in the movie Sullivan's Travels, one of my favorite movies. Finally, I want to make a few comments on how MI theory and neurodiversity could be integrated in a way that would benefit neurodivergent people. First, MI theory can serve as a theoretical foundation for understanding many of the skills, gifts, talents, and abilities possessed by neurodivergent individuals. There are several issues that could be explored linking MI theory and neurodiversity. One area is the field of evolutionary psychology. The key question in this regard is, why are the genes for this particular disorder still in the gene pool? One answer is that they might have served as an evolutionary advantage earlier in man's evolution. This is what Hartman's Hunters in a Farmer's World suggests. Also, MI theory can help educators and others to understand the uneven cognitive profiles frequently seen in many neurodivergent children, teens, and adults. For example, Williams syndrome has several deleterious consequences, some medical in nature, but they also have positive traits. MI theory can help us tease them out. For example, people with Williams syndrome have poor functioning in spatial and logical mathematical intelligence, but higher functioning in musical and certain aspects of linguistic and interpersonal intelligence. Then, too, there are practical applications that MI theory can make that might support the neurodiversity movement. Educators working with MI theory over the years have generated thousands of um, instructional strategies based on multiple intelligences. Many of these strategies include teaching someone using a method that taps a strength and at the same time helps the student in his area of difficulty. For example, using robots to teach social skills to kids on the autism spectrum represents a way of focusing on their need to develop social skills while using a machine which they may have a proclivity toward interacting with. MI theory can also serve as a practical way to teach neurodivergent kids, teens, and adults about their strengths and their challenges. In one of my books, Multiple Intelligences in the Classroom, I have a chapter that explores a range of activities for teaching students about their 8 kinds of smart, including different kinds of games, board games, a game where they go on an intelligence hunt, and so forth. I've written 2 books on neurodiversity. The first is The Power of Neurodiversity, Unleashing the Advantages of Your Differently Wired Brain. It's a basic introduction to neurodiversity intended for a general adult audience and provides practical strategies that can make a neurodivergent person's life easier and more fulfilling. My other neurodiversity book is Neurodiversity in the Classroom, Strength-Based Strategies to Help Students with Special Needs Succeed in School and Life. This is primarily intended for educators teaching from kindergarten through high school, but it can also be a helpful reference for parents seeking to better understand their kids. If you want to get in touch with me, my email is thomas@instituteforlearning.com. That's Thomas at institute4learning.com. You can visit my website, instituteforlearning.com, for more information about my work related to both multiple intelligences and neurodiversity, as well as other topics. On my website, I have a blog with numerous posts related to both of these areas. I hope you find this information interesting to you and that many neurodivergent children, teens, and adults will benefit from the work that you do with them. Thank you very much.